I'm very happy to have you with us today, Ann Manuel. And I'd like to ask you a few questions about your work, about some of the ideas that sustain your work. But this series of talks is part of our Revelations look at the UNB permanent collections. And in this case, we're looking at 7 wonderful female artists from our collection. So I'm very happy that you're here with us to talk. As part of International Women's Day, I'd like to maybe start with some of the questions I have about that. Can you tell me how your experience as a woman has sustained you in your art career?
I think at the very beginning, I didn't think it did, actually. I graduated from a fine arts program in the early 80s, 81. And to me, it felt like the whole gallery system and museum, public gallery system was male dominated. And there wasn't a big love for realistic work, which is what I was steeped in. And I felt also that being female was actually a disadvantage. Now, I don't know if that was just a script in my head or if that was reality, but it was the context that I felt at the time. But as I gained my voice in my work and built that supportive network, I think being a woman has sustained me. It's been essential, really. I mean, and the network that I have and the experiences that I have, I chalk it up to the strength of being a woman and finding my voice in my work.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. Were there any particular women in your life that were very influential in either your art or in your direction to become an artist?
Yes. First of all, I come from a long line of really strong females. My mom, my grandmother. My mom is one of 6 women in her family. And the oldest, and all of them have this fearless personality, very opinionated, good sense of humor, but really strong, independent women. Along with my sister, same thing, just really good, hearty sense of humor. I think part of that is coming from Newfoundland. So that's my base. That's what I come from. Mm-hmm. And they were very encouraging right from the get-go. There's no question. This is what you're born to do. You do this, and we will support you to do that. Recently in my career, I think one that really stands out for me is Sister Marie Helena Lynn. I had the good fortune of having her as a mentor for a particular body of work. And that has had a really direct influence in the type of work. And now currently, 3 female artists are really sustaining me. They're actually really getting me through this body of work that I'm working on now. And that's Brigitte Clavette, Denise Richard, and Alana Baird. And they're just, they're so encouraging and supportive, and they're so open about and sharing of their skills. Mm-hmm. It's remarkable.
Well, that's wonderful. It's great to have that kind of support and some very, very talented artists that you're connected with who have really great ideas and really great material abilities. Really, that's wonderful.
Yeah, they push me, and they don't put up with any kind of, they push. They share their skills and their ideas, and their critical input is really important to me.
That's fabulous. So the other part of this is that these are revelations. So the piece that we're looking at today is called Back Paddle. It's one of the fairly early work. I believe it's 2007 that this work was created. So in bearing in mind the idea of revelations, bearing in mind this work, bearing in mind this year that we've been living through, can you tell me a little bit about some of the revelations that you've experienced this year as a result of COVID, as a result of being a female, as a result of being an artist?
I think when I think about that series of works, actually, I think they're just as, they speak to me just as much today during this period as they did back then, but for different reasons. But certainly revelations. I mean, as an artist, it's a solo enterprise, really, for the most part. You're in your studio. So I would say typically probably what most artists would say, yay, be in my studio and not bothered. A revelation for me, and even though I would call myself an introvert, but sort of on the more social end of one, was that I get a lot of inspiration from being around people and seeing the patterns in the relationships and the connectivity with nature, all that. It's not just nature alone,
Hmm.
And so that was a huge revelation for me, how much I actually missed people. But I think also the revelation, even when I look back at that body of work and that work in particular, is about keeping afloat, the strategies that you have for that. And
Hmm.
that sounds trite, really, when you look at all these floating figures, but it really was about that at the time. And for me now, during this period, it's no different. It's the same strategies of breathing deeply, of getting connected, with yourself and with nature, all that. So those revelations, are the same almost through every major thing that you go through, whether it's worldwide or whether it's just you on your own. I think the revelations are pretty similar sometimes, or at least they are for me.
Right. And very much about keeping your head above water.
Right. Don't move too much.
Yeah.
Stay-
um, can you tell me a little bit about your artistic practice? Give us a little bit about your artistic background. Where did you go to school? Where did you grow up? You say you're from Newfoundland, so tell us a little bit about that.
Died in the wool. Oh, it's just a foundation, I think, for everything for me. Certainly growing up in the family that I did, in the community, but in Newfoundland in general, just that sense of community and identity. And at the time, there was no Fogo per se, as the world knows it now. So Newfoundland was the butt of everybody's jokes. And I remember doing my grad school work in BC and being told not to tell anyone else from Newfoundland. Um,
Wow.
so we've come a long way. So, but that's the background. But it's typically my work starts from that point of community and connectivity, and I think if I look at that body of work that back paddle comes from, I think that was the second body of work that I really felt like I had found my voice, and it was the beginning of this trajectory in my work. I spend typically a lot of time in, I won't call it research because it's not primary research, but reading and following up leads on various things. So right now, if I'm working on seed pods, I am studying the science around seed pods, speaking to biologists and arborists and that type of thing. But yeah, so that body of work led into the series that I'm doing now.
The work that you showed at the UNB Art Centre, the Worry Ladders. So you've moved from a two-dimensional platform to a three-dimensional platform. Are you still working in 3 dimensions now, or do you work back and forth between?
Back and forth. It depends solely on the idea. And from that series, The Head Above Water, the key thing that I took away from that was about breath. And oddly enough, when I did that series, I had pneumonia and I was struggling for breath. And you can look at the ones where I actually had pneumonia, and the marks are urgent. But going from that to a really key personal experience, which was the last breath of my father, where the palliative care nurses were just brilliant. They said, get close and breathe with him. And we inhaled and exhaled with him.
Wow.
It was painful. It was exquisitely painful, but a profound experience. And from that, I knew I wanted to work with breath, but I didn't know how to do it. And I had been in a wonderful residency in Alberta and met some very supportive, wonderful artists who were very encouraging around that idea and said, you'll figure it out. And we took a time out as a family to spend some time in France and had access to this Romanesque chapel. And every time I was in this chapel, I would feel my breath change. So in that moment, I switched into 3-dimensional work. I had done some installation stuff there, but I really wholeheartedly thought this is the only way to express it. So there's some concepts like the Worry Ladders, my rant about forestry practices. I couldn't figure out, how do you paint that? Would you go paint a bunch of trees, or clear cuts? No, it seemed to me that I needed to use a different medium for that. So, these ideas come and I think, what's the best way to express it? So that's typically what happens.
So what are you working on now? Tell us a little bit about, you said you have these 3 artists that are sort of sustaining you in your idea generation and critiquing and that kind of thing. So what are you working on now?
Well, and Matt, I'm working on a series, will be an installation for New Brunswick Museum, My Mother's Garden, it's Inner Sanctum. The idea comes straight from that series with Back Paddle, The Head Above Water, the idea of breath. straight into that experience with my father's last breath, and then creating, using what they did in the Romanesque chapels that made me feel like my breath completely changed. I decided that I was going to grow a sanctuary. So that started the sanctuary series. So it felt like all my work to date was feeding into this idea, all those life experiences. And since the sanctuary and everything coming out of it has come from that, I think. So I grew a sanctuary. I've been doing it for 10 years now. It'll be a lifelong project. Someone pointed out to me this morning the Long Now Foundation, the whole idea of the Long Now. And I'm starting to think that this is what my life's work will be. If you look at it, the whole thing will be one meandering idea about breath. But so I created this exterior sanctuary. So when you walk through this forest and come upon it, hopefully your breath will change. So I won't know if that's actually worked, right, for a long time as it's growing. But since then, I've done a lot of two-dimensional work related to sanctuary, and I started to look at the seed pods around there and the nests and all that stuff, and started to think about home, which was reflected in the Harbor exhibition. So now I propose to New Brunswick Museum, and it's funny, it's coincided with my mother's last breath, that I would do an interior sanctuary. Done the exterior, working on it, will be forever. But can I do an interior one where I take the seed pods from the disappearing or changing Acadian forest and then go from the wild garden, in other words, into the cultivated garden. One of my mother's last requests to me before she died was to clean out her garden in preparation for the sale of the house. And I kept the seed pods. So that's what I'm working on. I'm creating these seed pods from the Acadian forest and from my mother's garden with skills I don't have. Sucking brain because this is the only way I can figure out how to express that. I want the quietness that I have learned from Marie Helena Lenz's work, and I want to situate it in the room on an east-west trajectory, just as axis the same as these chapels are, 2-to-1 ratio, the whole 9 yards, but go a swag through the gallery that when you walk through it, it moves. And you have a sense of memory and loss, maybe, I don't know. But you're breathing life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, that sounds really amazing.
That's what I'm working on.
So
crazy.
When is this exhibition? When are you showing this exhibition?
Well, it's been postponed twice, COVID once, and roof repairs now. I'm so thankful for that because each it changes and my skills develop. The idea kind of gets more solidified.
So what's your, I guess you kind of answered this in certain ways, but what drives you to create?
Oh gosh, I can't not. Like, I wish I could not some days, right? Every time I open my eyes, there's just so many things to me that scream connectivity and creativity and relationships. And it's so, I love the world. It's so exquisitely beautiful. And to me, this is just me trying to understand some of it and have my little say or tease it out in my mind, some of these ideas, my understanding of the world. So I can't not do it. I think I would be deeply unhappy. Mm-hmm. So what draws me is it's like a beaver chewing a tree. It kind of has to. It's kind of like that.
Well, that's an interesting way to put it, for sure. So after you finish this exhibition at the NBM, do you have any other works going on? Anything that's planned for further off in the future, or something you're working on now that's going to be on display later?
Well, I'm always drawing and printmaking, and those feed whatever other work I'm doing, right? So if I have an idea about seed pod, then I for sure have done it in printmaking. I've done it in drawing. So I have this corresponding practice, though what most people will see will be, in this case, the installation. So I'm continuing to work on those, and one idea flows into the next. So yes, there's some things on the back burner that I'd like to sort of tease out after, for sure. Right. I will be back into painting and painting the figure and just getting lost in paint for one.
Yeah, it's a beautiful medium itself. What's your earliest memory of art? Was there something that really, as a child or as a young person, that you saw that you really, it just opened your eyes and made you understand that world or find that connectivity with that world?
Well, I was drawing right from the get-go, apparently, and I always stated it, even as early as age 4, that I was going to be an artist.
Mm.
But there's some key memories, odd thing about making marks, like copying people's handwriting on letters, just the mark making that I took such great joy in.
Mm.
Limited resources in terms of looking at art at the time in Newfoundland. But my father signed me up at age 11 for one of those Memorial University outreach courses, and Don Wright and Heidi Oberheide taught those at the time.
Oh, wow.
And so I was in a class of middle-aged women, and how did I get here so fast? And saw something, and they paid attention to me and encouraged me, and that, and then I began exhibiting work thanks to them. At age 11 and 13 with Mavis Penny, and Edith Goodrich was the first curator that ever exhibited my work. So it was an early experience. That was the art I saw, was other people's art in this class.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
it was the art of Don Wright and Heidi Oberheide that blew me away. And my mark making absolutely is a direct result of Heidi Oberheide's mark making.
Interesting. That's really
My
fascinating.
approach to installation would be, not that I could speak to Don Wright's approach,
Mhm.
but that would have been my earliest influence. Why not have a devil's purse out on the beach, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
yeah, that's where it comes from. But that would have been age 11.
Interesting. Wow. Okay. So I'm going to ask you some fun questions now. If you could steal a work of art in the whole wide world, this is a game I play when I go to galleries and I see an exhibition that I love. There's always one work that stands out for me that I would just love to have. So if you could steal a work of art, what would be the work that you would steal?
Honestly, well, sculpture, I would take David.
There you go. What's better than that?
For painting and something that's a little bit goofier, I'd be having Anselm Kiefer for sure.
Okay. Okay. So why the David? I mean, those are two very, very different kinds of artwork. One's very, the epitome of classical beauty, especially in our Western culture, and then one that's a lot more amorphous. What about those two very different things? And I guess maybe that's in your work. When I look at back paddle, I see the figurative, or the drawings and the paintings you've done of dancers. You're a very fine figure painter, but you also have this landscape, and a much more, I guess, I wouldn't say the word diffused, but that's the only word I can think of right now, but a much broader understanding of environments, let's say.
Yeah, I think, well, I'm attracted to David for I just can't understand the skill level. I don't even know if we can see that anymore. Like the skill level is just exceptional. So there's so much to learn from that, but also the learning around that about it not being a biblical reference necessarily. You see a lot of people looking at it with their Bibles open, but that David and Goliath, the political sense. So I just get a lot of inspiration from it on a lot of different levels, but certainly how you can do that in stone, any of Michelangelo's works.
Yeah.
The Anselm Kiefer, that just pushes me. When we were in France, his studio was not far from where we were, and I spent a lot of time trying to track that down in between kids' school stuff. But no one would give up where it was. No tourist bureau would give it up. But though his works push me, and they push me to think of landscape in a different way, and of the freedom with materials, the permission, not to use lead, but it just gives just 200%. Work ethic, I think, just that emanates from both of those works.
Right.
A lot. I'd steal so much on
Yeah, you'd have to have a warehouse.
more than, yeah.
So in terms of female artists right now, who would be your favorite female artist that you draw inspiration from?
Well, I'm looking locally right now.
Yes.
And I would have to say Brigitte Clavet's work for sure, and Alana Baird's understanding of pattern making. Those are things I'm looking at. They're right front and center. Denise Richard, how she actually constructs the things that she constructs. So the reason I'm looking at that work right now, and the same with like the way Brigitte puts things together, is because that's what I need to do right now.
Right.
Pattern making. Further afield, though, I've been reading, like, say, Marina Abramovic's biography, that type of thing about installation and where you insert yourself in that. So those are some of the things, and not necessarily people. I mean, in the case of reading that work, not necessarily an artist whose work I admire.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not every piece. Certainly, you know, the artist is present. I did, but some of the thinking behind some of the things I don't. But I appreciate the thinking.
Mm-hmm. 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 Very interesting. Okay, we're gonna play another game then. You're fun.
Okay.
It's called Either Or.
Oh shoot.
So you can, this is just for fun. So I'm just gonna call them out, and you're gonna tell me either or. Barbara Hepworth or Camille Claudel?
Barbara Hepworth.
Yoko Ono or Elizabeth Vigée-Lebrun?
Yoko Ono.
Cindy Sherman or Jenny Holzer?
Jenny Holzer.
Suzanne Valadon or Louise Bourgeois?
Louise Bourgeois.
That's it. I just find that kind of a fun thing because it's interesting to see how, which of these artists connect and for what reasons, So thank you. That was a lot of fun.
I wouldn't have thought of Jenny Holzer. I'm going to just go read, if I can find a biography. I love reading these biographies. That fits,
Yeah.
I've been looking at Louise Bourgeois' work recently as well. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got some wonderful female artists, and I'm glad that you're part of this wonderful elect. So thank you very much for being with us today. If there's anything else you would like to say to us, I would be very happy to hear any last words.
More on the theft. I would steal a Helen Frankenthaler. I'm going to be thinking about theft.
I was going to say they're going to have a long list of artworks you want to steal now. Sorry, Interpol. I didn't mean to put this out there.
I read those books too about art theft. I just find them fascinating.
They very much are, yeah. Or art, for me too, art fraud. Where someone has taken, the style of an artist and replicated it almost perfectly, so that it's very, very difficult. But the tell is always that we incorporate an element of our contemporary mind into that, and I find that absolutely fascinating.
And that would be, if I had a last thought, that would be it about the tell, that the lifespan of a work, of a person's life, the work of a person's life is one long work. And if you were to look back at anything I've done, you can see the repetition, you can see the recurring themes. And at one point I thought that was so disparate, everything that I was doing. And it's not, it's all connected because it's coming from here. And I just have a better understanding of what here is.
Yes. And I think as one gets older, when you're young and you're in the middle of it, you can't see how all these influences and all these, all these different that appear to be random, but as you get older in your life, you can see how those actually line up and create the rich fabric of a life, or of an artistic practice. These things that just you couldn't figure out how did they come together, but they really do. And I think that's the beauty of the aging process, is you can actually see those things in a longer timeline.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of being an artist. I'm just getting going.
Yeah. Well, that is it too. Absolutely. Yeah. It takes a lifetime of work and research and looking and talking to actually find the full fruit, I think, of an artistic practice. Thank you very much, Anne. It was wonderful to talk to you today.
Thank you very much, Marie.
All right. See you.
Bye-bye.